Welcome back to another episode of the Joey Musto Show presented by Team Musto. Today we're going to be taking a look at a couple of properties that recently came off the market. I'm going to give you my opinion on why I think they came off the market and what we would have done to get these properties sold. So let's go ahead and get started by talking about 92 Makalani Place. Now this is located in Makawao, which is in upcountry Maui. It's an area that I really haven't talked about much in my content, but it is an area that I would like to talk more about. It's where I was born and raised and where I live now. So this thing was listed at just under 1.5 million. It was on the market for over a year, so that's important to keep in mind because obviously the market was different when they priced this, but it did end up reducing to 1.25 million. It was four bed, two and a half bath, 2,024 square feet. Now, if you look at the past 90 days in Makawao, there have been two properties that sold. The range was between 1.10 million and 1.375 million. So obviously it's not a huge sample size, but the median sold price was 1.282 million. Now, this is why it's important to actually understand the different areas and towns in upcountry Maui, because if you just look at the headline numbers, if you look at Makwa, Olinda, and Hali'imaile, you would see that the median sold price was 1.625 million. And we saw five home sell. Median days on market was 293 days. Percent of list price received, 97%. Price per square foot was 967. So obviously, the difference between the median sold price in Makwa over the past 90 days and the median sold price in Upcountry in February 2026 is quite different. And that's why it's important because if you look at something like in Olinda, right, at the top of Olinda, you might be looking at a property that is big from a square footage standpoint and it has, views of the entire island. And that's obviously going to sell for a higher number than something on Makwa Ave or closer to Makwa Town. And the same thing goes with Hali'imaile, where you find new builds those might sell for more than something, an older home in Makawao. If you look at the price per square foot range over the past 90 days in Makawao, the average was 623. The range was between 548 and 698. Home sizes 1,970 and 2,008 square feet. So 92 was a little bit bigger. But the average days on market over the past 90 days was 67, and this one was 367. So to me, this one is a story of, too little, too late. I think after they did the price reduction, the property was in a pretty good range based on the last 90 days of sales. Um, but I think what happened was they lost the momentum by listing it so high from the start. And I think, after the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month, people had already seen it and discarded it just because the price was too high. And then when they came back and did the price reduction, maybe it wasn't marketed, as like, hey, we're reducing the price on this and here's where it sits now, as well as it could have been. Or maybe people just weren't interested because, new inventory came on the market and they're on to the next thing. So how would we have gotten this thing sold? So I think there are a couple of reasons that it did deserve a premium. If you look at the condition, now it's a little bit hard to do with renovations and upgrades just because it's a little bit subjective, like if the home sellers put in new flooring, maybe they put in LVP flooring, they might think, hey, this justifies a premium. But when a buyer comes through, they might hate that kind of flooring, right? So it's a little bit hard to justify a premium just based on renovations. Owned PV system, which we do see a lot of in Maui. It just makes the electric bill more affordable. Location, this one I think is important. I think a cul-de-sac location in Makwa is better than, a property right off of Makwa Ave. So I think it does deserve a premium for the cul-de-sac. Now, aggressive pricing would have been between 1.095 million and 1.150 million. Do I think you would have needed to do the aggressive price range here? Not necessarily. And the reason for that is that there's not a ton of properties in Magwao that are up for sale. Like there's not a lot of new inventory being added on a week by week basis, compared to something like Kahalui for single family homes or Kihei for single family homes. So when something does come up in Makawao, the group of buyers like will look at it and they will consider it. But again, if you come out and you're priced way too high, they will just move on to the next thing. And it's not like this thing was priced in one of these high demand areas in Makawao, like Maui Uplands or Makawao Ranch Acres, where again, maybe you could get away with a little bit of a higher price there, just because they are in demand and they don't hit the market that often. So, the goal with this pricing strategy would have been competition. It would have been how many people can we get through the door and how many offers can we get? Maybe we get ourselves in a situation where it can sell above asking price, which in today's Maui real estate market is a little bit unrealistic unless you are, in Kahului, even in Wailuku, where the homes are in demand, you're not seeing a lot of homes sell above asking price. So again, I probably wouldn't have went with the aggressive pricing in this case scenario. Would have went with something more moderate pricing between 1.175 million and 1.25 million. That's right around the market average. And this is all dependent on if the home can show well. And what I mean by that is if you have a situation where you have renters or the space is really cluttered, it's hard for people, for potential buyers, when they're walking through to envision like, what their life would look like as homeowners, which is what people do when they look at properties, right? Like we would use this room in this way, or we would do this with the yard. And if you have a bunch of junk in the yard, or you have, renters and it looks really lived in, it's just hard to envision yourself in that house. And instead, what you're going to be envisioning is like the flaws that you do see, like, oh, we got to fix that. How much is that going to cost, right? And that can all be heightened if the property doesn't show well, or if you have, renters waiting in the cul-de-sac for you to finish up the showing. You don't want people to feel rushed. You want them to feel super relaxed and just, yeah, envisioning what their future would look like in the house. So if the property does have the ability to show well, which by all accounts this one did, I think it's even more of a justification for the moderate pricing, and this is likely where it should have been positioned. High test the market would have been 1.275 million to 1.350 million. This is near the top of recent comps. And again, is this in Maui Uplands? Is this in Makawao Ranch Acres? Um, is this in a place in Makawao where people really want to be? In my opinion, it's not in, one of these the most in demand areas. This only works if buyers see it as one of the best options available. So I think a good strategy would have been the moderate pricing here. And yeah, moving forward from there. Now, this is a completely different property that we're going to talk about now, Grand Champions. So this is a condo complex in Wailea. The thing that I like about Grand Champions is when you spend a lot of time in Kihei or Wailea, you get a lot of questions about, hey, is there anything we could get in Wailea for under $1 million? And Grand Champions is that answer. It's one of the only condo complexes in Wailea where you will see prices under $1 million. And the jump between Grand Champions and something like Wailea Ilua or Wailea Ikolu, which is kind of the next level up on an affordability scale, is quite drastic. So that's why I do like to point to Grand Champions. This unit started at 950 grand. It ended up reducing to 860 grand. It was one bed, two bath, 908 square feet, was on the market for 342 days. Now, in the past 6 months, there has not been a lot of turnover, which is why I didn't use the past 90 days at Grand Champions. But there was only two units that sold. The average sold price was 830 grand. The range was between 800 grand and 860 grand. So obviously with the price reduction, this thing is still priced at the higher end. Um, Based on that range. Average price per square foot was $815 and the average days on market was 257 days. Um, so again, Unit 74 was listed a lot longer. And kind of the story and the thing to pay attention to with Grand Champions is that buyers are negotiating there. If you look at the gap between list and reality, Unit 67, which sold, was listed at $990 per square foot, sold for 881. It was about 11% difference. Same thing with Unit 12, 836 to 749, 10%. Um, so pricing needed to be positioned lower from the start to actually land in the market. And we're going to talk a little bit later about, why if you go with an aggressive pricing strategy at Grand Champions, that might be like what you think you should do just because there is so little demand. But you have to be willing to accept the fact that it might still sell 10 to 11% off of the list price. So if you accept that number, not what you're listing at, just because we're not seeing, full price offers out here, then you can list at that lower price. But first, how did the Wailea condo market perform in February 2026 and how has it performed year to date? Well, February was quite the month. I mean, 13 condo sales, which is up from 8 last February. But even if you look at the year to date numbers, we saw 19 condos sell, right? So that means only six sold in January, which again, people coming off the holidays, they're not like the first thing they want to do in the new year is buy a condo. So you could say that was one of the reasons we only saw six sales in January, and then the jump to 13. The median sales price 2.65, um, and then it went up to 2.2625. Total dollar volume was up was about up 86.5% year over year. So we're seeing demand return, but only for properties priced appropriately. How would we have gotten this unit sold at Grand Champions? Well, there are a couple valid reasons why I think this thing deserved a premium. The first being that it was a top floor corner unit, which offers more privacy, had vaulted ceilings, which makes it feel really open. And then this is the key one, unobstructed ocean and golf course views, which you're not always going to find at Grand Champion. So for those reasons, also it was in the upper section of the complex, but for those reasons, I think that's why this thing did deserve to be priced at a premium. And I wouldn't have went with an aggressive pricing strategy here, just due to the fact that we're not seeing full price offers like they talked about earlier. So if you listed this at 800 grand, you're probably not getting a full price offer. You're going to get 10 to 11% off of that. And would I be comfortable with that number? Probably not as an owner. Um, but aligned with where recent sales closed between 800 and 860K. Uh, if you went towards the higher end, maybe 825, you could justify the 10% buyer negotiation seen in comps and create immediate value relative to competing inventory. So obviously, if something with an ocean, unobstructed ocean view comes out at 800 grand, that's going to make it a lot tougher for everything else in the complex to sell. Probably would have went with the moderate pricing again between 835 and 865. This is positioned near the top, but there are valid reasons. Unobstructed ocean view, top floor, upper section of the complex. So there are valid reasons that it did deserve a premium and probably a moderate price would have been good. If you go high test the market pricing, even though you think, the unobstructed ocean views, that's why it should be priced at a high test the market and maybe in a seller's market or in a more normal market, you could justify that and get more for your money, or you get, more of your money back here on the sale. This would be priced above recent sales, relies on view and location to justify the price. Buyers have already shown resistance at this level, I believe, with, 257 days at the Grand Champions on the market. So, um, would have been a little bit risky, in my opinion, to go aggressive pricing, and it would have just been what it was if you go high test the market pricing, something that eventually comes off the market. Somewhere in the middle probably would have been the best solution. And then the last one that we saw come off the market that we're going to talk about is Kai Makani, 16201. Now, Kai Makani is a different feel, obviously, than Upcountry, and it is different than Grand Champions. This is in North Kihei. The unit was listed at 1.29 million, did a reduction to 1.225 million, three bed, two bath. It was a little bit bigger than a lot of the other things that you're going to find in Kihei, especially when it comes to condos. You're not going to find that kind of square footage at a bunch of other places. You might still find it in certain areas, but like if you look, Maui Sunset, Kahale Makai, Luana Kai, those kinds of areas just don't offer the space that Kai Makani does. And this one was on the market for 137 days. I believe this was the past 6 months of sale. We saw two units sell, so turnover again has been relatively slow. Average sold price 1.029 million. There was a range between 800 grand and 1.258 million. Average price per square foot 994. Average days on market 81 days. So I think a key here would have been when you're pricing this one, price close to about, 1,000 square feet. That was the kind of gap that we saw. We saw 201 list at 1,007 per square foot and then sell for 972. So unlike Grand Champions, these ones were selling for closer to what they were asking. Even 202, 1,050 ended up selling for 1,016. So I think you would have wanted to be right around that $1,000 per square foot price range. Buyers weren't negotiating heavily here. Pricing still needs to align closely with where units were actually selling. Now, Kaimakani is a little bit different and it's not talked about that much, so I just wanted to give a little bit of an account for it. It's a residential condo complex in North Kihei, built in 2007, so it is a lot newer than a lot of the other stuff you're going to find, not just in North Kihei, but South Kihei. A lot of those condo complexes, built in 87 or the 90s, they're a lot older. It's across the street from my Poinai Beach Park. Now, this beach that is immediately across the street, these are not the best beaches that Kihei has to offer. And this is why you will see things in South Kihei sell for a premium because you've got Kamaole Beach 1, 2, and 3. Those are great beaches for swimming. You have Ke'avakapu Beach, which is relatively close. Great beach for hanging out, swimming. There's just more restaurants. There's more things to do in South Kihei. So if you're at Kaimakani, it's a little bit of a quieter lifestyle. And as far as the best beach goes, you're about a 5 to 10 minute walk from Sugar Beach, which is one of the best beaches on Maui. It's 6 miles of uninterrupted shoreline. You can walk all the way to Ma'alaya and back. It's great for people that like to exercise, walkers, runners, swimmers. So you are relatively close to, again, one of the best beaches on Maui, but you don't have quite the variety of beaches and things to do, as if you were in South Kihei, which again could be good for some buyers, could be bad for some buyers. Amenities include pool spa, fitness center, barbecue areas. There are storage and it's strong appeal for both full-time residents. I would say it's one of the better complexes if you are a full-time resident because it's more convenient than being in South Kihei. And like if you're just on vacation 2 weeks a year, you might never leave South Kihei. But if you're going to be living here year round, you're going to have to go into central Maui. You're going to have to go to different areas around the island. Easier to get in and out of Makani than it is, at the Royal Maui Inn or something deeper in South Kihei. So, and second home buyers, also a good thing just because of the amenities and the storage and the proximity to Sugar Beach. How would we have gotten this sold? So I think there are a couple reasons it deserves the premium. Like I talked about with the Makawao property, it's hard to give it a premium just based on the remodel, but it was in 2022, updated flooring, kitchen, bathrooms, finishes throughout. Um, like a really good reason I think it did deserve a premium is because it was larger, 1,238 square feet, same size as the top comp, and bigger than the lower priced unit. So the aggressive pricing range here would have been 1.025 million to 1.075 million. This is clear value versus the other three bed options. And it's positioned well below the $1.258 million top comp. So what this unit didn't have that I think needs to be talked about is the ocean view. And I think that's why it would have been hard to go with a high test the market price range here, or even something between the moderate pricing and the high test the market. Just because people that are looking to buy in Kihei, they probably want to be close to the beach. And the complex does offer that, but they also probably want to have an ocean view. That's important not just for condo buyers in Kihei, but single family home buyers as well. And the fact that this unit didn't have that makes it hard to justify the high test of market price, in any kind of real estate market. Whatever cycle we're going through in Maui, if it doesn't have that ocean view, it's always going to be a little bit less desirable than something that does. So how do you make up for that? Well, I think you have to make up for it on the price. Moderate pricing would have been between 1.10 million, 1.175 million. To go towards the higher end of the moderate price range here, I think we would have had to be in a seller's market or just a more normal Maui real estate market, and Kihei condos is anything but. But it does account for the upgrades below the ocean view premium, and it leaves room for negotiation while staying competitive. Now, like we talked about at Makani, things are selling relatively close to asking price, so you don't have to worry about that. Like if you were trying to sell at something like the Grand Champions, where we're seeing that bigger gap between what it's listed at, what it sells for. And then so you just have to answer the question for yourself, like, is the premium justified? And it might be for a specific buyer, like they might come in, love the flooring, love the way that they updated the unit, and they're willing to pay a premium for it. Um, the space might be really important to them. I would say space across the board is generally like people do want more space. Um, but again, the remodel is really, really up to the buyer. So probably would have went with the moderate pricing here. Here's just our team information. I'm on all the social media accounts, pretty much all the platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Substack for written content, which is good if you want to use these kind of videos as a guide, like while you're searching for something on Maui. Um, and yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, leave in the comment section the kind of videos that you would like to see. Maybe there's a certain part of Maui that you're interested in and there's not a lot of content being created on it. And you kind of want to get a better idea of what it's like. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching.